Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. I am sitting here this afternoon. I got to preface this for everybody that's listening. When we're recording this, it's a Friday afternoon, and Kendall Jones is my guest, and Kendall's sipping a beer, and I have one too. Which normally I have coffee, but which we're going to talk about. But we're drinking beer this afternoon. So, Kendall, before I get you going, what are you drinking this afternoon?
I am drinking a recently released IPA, a new one from Reuben's Brews. It's called Brighten Up. It's not hazy, but it's a little bit hazy, meaning it's unfiltered, but it's not intentionally hazy. It's pretty tasty. Lots of good tropical fruit flavor.
Okay. Well, I'm having an Elysian Space Dust. I'm, just kind of I stumbled across that one, and like I told you before, I'd stopped drinking beer for a while because we weren't getting along anymore.
Right.
But Space Dust, yeah, I kind of like it. So, Kendall, you have a blog called the Washington Beer Blog. And I think you're the first person I've talked to in a long time whose website is older than mine, because you're stating 2008. I started in 2010, so you got a couple years on me. Thanks for sitting down.
I called it a blog because that was like a cool word to use back then. So long ago. That's the name of my website dates itself.
I love it. So you live in Seattle area, and earlier you said you were born in Tacoma and grew up in the Bellevue area.
That's correct.
When you were a kid, I don't think you thought about having a beer blog. So what did you want to do before you got into this?
What did I want to do?
Yeah, what did you want to do?
I wanted to be a rock star.
Okay.
But who didn't, right? But before I got into this, what I did do is I worked in technology. I worked for many years. I worked in software.
Okay.
For a time, I worked what felt like the majority of my adult life, even though it was only a number of years, for a large software manufacturer based in Redmond, Washington. And they tended to put, over the course of just a few years, they tended to put a lot of miles on me. And I moved on to another company, and I was working in the software industry as a writer, doing primarily like marketing and like user-facing writing. And then 2008, 2009 happened, and people like me were immediately expendable. So I ended up trying to find a job in a market that was just really depressed, and it was really, really hard. And at some point, I had started this Washington Beer blog, and it was intentionally, we intended to write a book about Washington beer, and it was going to be kind of a guide to like all the breweries in Washington. We wanted to write a book about, my wife and I wanted to do a book about going around and touring all 75 of the breweries in Washington. But by the time we got done with that conversation, there were 95. And by the time I started talking about, mapping out what it would be to actually do the research to write the book, there was 110. So it was just growing too fast, and we're like, this can't happen in a book form. It's just going to have to be updated too frequently. It's at this point, it was just like, it was crazy. What we imagined doing really couldn't happen. And so we just decided, we had here in West Seattle, I live in West Seattle, and we have a very, very prolific neighborhood blog that's actually been nationally recognized. And it's like, you hear a siren go down the street, you get on the blog to see what it's about. You find out anything that's happening in West Seattle, you find out about on the West Seattle blog. And at the time I was like, I want to be the West Seattle blog, but for Washington beer. That was that's the other reason why I ended up calling it a blog, is that I did honestly, I'm proud to say that I fashioned my blog after Tracy and what she's done with the West Seattle blog, because it's hugely successful. She's been to the White House. She's met the president because her blog is so great. The local news media quotes her stories all the time. So I was like, I'm very proud to say that I based my business after hers. She's done a remarkable job, and I just wanted to be something like that for the Washington beer community.
All right. We're going to come back to that though, because you said something and we're going to follow up on something. As a kid, you wanted to be a rock star.
That's true. I still do. I'm not a kid anymore, but
who did you want to be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. The people that I would say I idolized as, Robert Plant. If I had to pick one, it'd be Robert Plant or Ozzy Osbourne.
Robert Plant or Ozzy Osbourne. Okay.
Yeah. Rock and roll, hardcore rock and roll. And that my musical taste changed over the years. And, eventually I realized the value of being something more like a Jimmy Buffett.
Okay.
Having a career that lasted longer and made you, billions of dollars instead of millions of dollars. But yeah, those were all pipe dreams. But, I still play guitar and sing a little bit and played in a rock band for 15 years that we just disbanded, when we all got into our mid 50s and decided we shouldn't be trying to be, hardcore heavy metal rockers anymore.
What was the band called?
We were called Four on the Floor.
I've heard that name before. I haven't seen you, but I have heard that name before. Okay.
We played a lot of, because of who I am and who I know, we played a lot of brewery anniversary parties and different events at breweries. We played at the Washington Brewers Festival out at Merrymore Park a couple of times. And our mutual friend, Chris Baldwin, he designed the logo for Four on the Floor, and it was such an unbelievably obvious ripoff of the Mattel Hot Wheels. It's like, I keep waiting for that cease and desist letter, which I would frame and put on the wall. But it's just that our logo that's like on our drum head and on t-shirts and stuff is just such an obvious ripoff of the Hot Wheels logo. And it's beautiful. And Chris did a great job on it.
Now, I would say Chris would defend himself and say he wasn't ripping anybody off. That was pure inspiration on his part.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure that's what, yeah. You should see the logo though.
I never saw Zeppelin live, but I went and saw Robert Plant a handful of years ago in Spokane. Mm-hmm. And I was absolutely like, how did I miss this guy?
Yeah.
I think at that time he was like 72 years old. And the stage presence he has, without being flamboyant or anything, he just commanded the room, and it was like, and his band was phenomenal. But yeah, Robert,
you probably saw the most recent tour. I never saw Zeppelin. I'm not that old, but I saw Page Plant, after Bonham had died and they got back together in the mid and late 90s. I saw those shows, which were great. And I saw Plant, most recently he was performing with, but the opening act was Lucinda Williams.
Okay.
And I got to see that out at Merrymore Park. And you're right. Robert Plant is just, and his voice is nothing at all like it was when he was 19 years old, singing A Whole Lot of Love.
No.
But his voice is still just butter, and it's just, he's an inspiration to me still, because he proves that you don't have to be able to sing like you could when you were 22 years old to still be a great singer and, like you said, command a room and sing with emotion and heart and really, be able to touch people that way.
So did both Lucinda Williams and Robert Plant sing Can't Let Go?
That's funny. No, they didn't. But that is funny. And it would have been awesome if they'd done it together, but that didn't happen.
So the guy who wrote that song lives in Seattle.
Oh, really?
Randy Weeks.
Who wrote that? Who?
Randy Weeks. And if you get a chance, he plays at the Sea Monster in Wallingford on Sundays, like the first and third Sunday of each month, like from 4 to 7 o'clock. It's like the senior citizens special,
because I've written a few songs in my day too, but if I wrote a song and either of those artists sang my song, I would just be like, I'm done. Yeah. It's not going to get any better than this. I'm done.
We saw him play. So a fellow West Seattleite is Christy McWilson. Do you know Christy?
I have met her.
Okay. So Christy's, my wife and I really enjoy seeing Christy when she plays. And so September, I think last year, she played up in Conway at the Conway Muse. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been to that venue?
I've been to the Conway. Is that the same as the Conway Tavern or whatever?
No,
it's up there. Okay.
No, the Conway Muse is like a dairy barn.
Oh, cool.
And they've got, so the Conway Muse has 3 stages. They have an outdoor stage, which is an old semi-truck trailer that's converted into a stage, around fire pits and all this stuff. And then the Dairy Barn has a very intimate for like 1 or 2 people to play. And then upstairs holds about 120 people. And we went there, and Randy was the opening act for Christy this time. And I'd never seen the guy before. Go, you're close. Wallingford is not far. You go see him. It's early. You're not that old. I'll go that early in the afternoon.
So it's not a doors at 9.
No, 4 o'clock.
Show starts at 10 kind of place. 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I wish more places did that. Yeah. I mean, I love that kind of show.
Okay. I think you'll enjoy him. He and his band are.
I've got a beer related Chris McWilson story.
Okay, let's hear that.
Okay. This would have been probably 20 years ago. Yeah, it was 20 years ago. Longer ago than that, about 25 years ago, I started an organization called Beer Church. And it stemmed from the idea that we could put together parties just like we did in college, where we would have kegger parties and earn money to help pay our rent and help pay our electricity bill and stuff. But instead, we would have these beer-focused parties and earn money for various charitable causes.
Okay.
And we've been doing at least one event a year ever since then. And it's pretty cool. But Beer Church is a different thing than what we're talking about today. But way back then, I was contacted. I'd gotten some press for Beer Church, and some big press, international press, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was on Morning Edition on NPR they were talking to me about Beer Church and stuff, and they did a whole piece of it. I don't know, it was like 2 or 3 minutes on NPR in the morning about Beer Church, and things just blew up. And next thing I knew, I was on radio stations all over the world, and Armed Forces Radio, and every version of The Mountain and every version of The End in every media market around the United States, which was enlightening. But they have a mountain in every city, every major city has the same radio stations that we do, just slightly different names. That was the beginning of the consolidation of radio. But anyway, I got contacted by a show by the Food Network, or whatever it was. I don't remember if it was the Food Network or what, but it was Bobby Flay.
All right.
It was Barbecue with Bobby Flay, one of Bobby Flay's very original early shows. And they contacted me and they said, do you guys have anything coming up? We're going to be up there in the end of August, let's say, whatever it was. We're going to be up there in the end of August doing some other stuff. And if you guys just happen to have some sort of a Beer Church event going on, we would love to come by. And if it involved barbecue or something, then we would love to come by and check out your event for the show. And I said, well, how about that? We just happen to have an event coming up that week in August, right?
Wow, who knew?
So we threw it together real quick, and it was a beach party here in West Seattle, down by the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock.
All right.
Between Lincoln Park and the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock, if people know where that's at. We had a friend lived on the beach down there, and we had a big beach party, and we got Christy to come. And Christy came, and her band came and played on the deck of this house. Now, when they edited it all down, our spot on Barbecue with Bobby Flay was about 3.5 minutes or something. Sure. It was really lame, and it made me realize that we should never do that again. It's like it was way too much work for too little exposure. But Christy got some national TV recognition that day. I mean, at least she was in the background playing. I don't think they ever mentioned her name or anything, but she was in the background playing, which was pretty cool. And I was blown away that she agreed to come and do this. We had some mutual friends or something, because West Seattle,
right?
We had some mutual friends, and she's so great, and she's such a great entertainer and such a great singer, and I was so blown away that she wanted to come and play this party for us, and that was really cool.
She's been a guest on the show, and back in 1982, Christy was in a band called the Dinette Set. All right. And I saw them once or twice back in the early 80s. Forgot all about her. Sorry, Christy. But there's a guitar player by the name of Dave Alvin out of California. And Dave plays up in Seattle at the Tractor is where I've seen, a friend of mine introduced me to Dave Alvin, and we'd go see Dave, and we went down to Hardly Strictly Bluegrass one year in San Francisco, Dave, blah, blah, blah. And Christy has recorded with Dave. Dave's produced some of her albums. She would get up on stage with Dave. And I thought, I should get Christy on. This would be kind of cool. You know, I was like, I forgot about the dinette set, et cetera, et cetera. So I reached out to Christy's manager and worked things out. And she said, well, come on over to the house. We'll record at the house. Okay. So drove her from Wenatchee over to Christy McWilson's house. Never been to her home. Really only said hello to her in passing at a bar. And she knew that I liked the Heats, the band from Seattle. And she and oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on her name, and I'm gonna never forgive myself if I forget her name. Oh, forgive me. It was the other singer in the band, and she's been a guest on the show too. And it's going to come to me, and it's going to drive me nuts. Anyway, they did an acoustic version of "I Don't Like Your Face" for me while we were recording the episode. And then all of a sudden, the band's there on the deck, and they're playing, and it was just this surreal experience. She's a wonderful person. So there we go. And why can't I think? I am so sorry.
Well,
I am spacing her name, and that's going to drive me absolutely nuts.
You'll probably think of it before we're done talking, so don't worry about it.
So you wanted to be a rock star. You became a writer in the tech industry, so there's a little disconnect there. You mentioned kegs in college. So where'd you go to school at?
Western in Bellingham.
You went to Western. Is that where you met Chris, just out of curiosity?
No, well, kind of. I mean, that's where we started to be friends and hanging out together quite a bit. But we had a lot of mutual friends in high school. We didn't go to the same high school, but we went to adjacent high schools and had a lot of friends that, you know, we had friends that had gone to junior high school together, and things like that. So, I mean, we probably hung out at some parties when we were in high school too, but we didn't really know each other and start hanging out until we were in college.
Okay. And the person's name is Ricky Mifune. Sorry, Ricky.
Ricky Mifune.
Yeah, she's a wonderful person. Just had that moment. So you went to Western. Okay. I went to Central. I'm kind of seeing, you mentioned kegs in school. We never did that. Actually, my very first day as a freshman at Central, my roommate tried to bring a keg into the dorm and was kicked out of school that day. First day. Because Central didn't allow, forget the underage thing. They just didn't allow kegs. So yeah. All right.
I know people that I knew that went to Central said there was a lot of parties out on the river. A lot
of People's Pond. It was a fun time. I mean, my bio used to say my freshman year was the best 6 years of my life. So anyway, we had a good time. Met some wonderful people there, lifelong friends. So you started the blog in 2008 kind of out of a need for, like you said, employment wasn't.
No, it was before I'd lost my job, actually.
Okay.
It was before I got laid off, but it was, like I say, it was a response to the decision that we couldn't write the book, or that we shouldn't write the book. And we started the blog, and it started very small. And it was just, I was doing it very, very part-time. I was just, pushing a couple of stories up a week, and they were very short and very simple, and there was not much to it. But then after a couple of years, and after, so I guess it was probably just over more than a year later that I ended up on the streets looking for work. And then, like a year of banging my head against that wall trying to find a job, my wife was like, you should see if there's a way that we can, maybe monetize the blog, and maybe you should be doing this more full time. And I still wasn't sure how that was going to look. And I'm still not sure how that's going to look. So yeah, then it became more of a full-time kind of thing. And I started really ramping it up and got some great advice from people that said, if you really want to make a go at this, you need to get your name out there. You need to be writing, not just for your own blog, you need to be writing for local magazines and for magazines and get some bylines. So I started doing that, and I wrote for Seattle Magazine. I was a big contributor to Seattle Magazine for a few years. Had at one point the biggest story I had in Seattle Magazine. There was different then. There's new owners now. Seattle Magazine is back, which is great. But they were down for a couple of years. There was a bankruptcy problem, and they went down for a couple of years, and now they're back, but with new owners and stuff. But back when I wrote for them, it was pretty remarkable. I think it was like, 2013 or 2014 or something that I got there was a few years where I got the cover story. Beer was on the cover of Seattle Magazine, and which was pretty awesome. And then one year I had a total of like 14 pages of content that I created for them in a regional lifestyle magazine. I mean, it was that didn't speak so much to how prolific I'd become, or anything about me as where craft beer had come, that a magazine like Seattle would like dedicate that much of its so many pages to beer, and that they were able to get advertisers to help make that happen and stuff. It spoke volumes about what had happened in the world of craft beer. So for me, the reason I bring that up is that was the trajectory. Like I mentioned earlier, that we went from like 75 to 100 to 110 to 190 to 250 breweries, just like amazing. We had 3 or 4 breweries opening every month, sometimes more. And that went on, and that was a nationwide phenomenon. And that was just like a wave that I was riding. My blog got more and more popular and got more and more traction and more hits, for lack of a better way to put it, as the craft beer thing just continued to gain momentum. And I kind of rode that wave, and here I am.
When you were writing for Seattle Magazine, was Lou Maxon there?
I do not remember a Lou.
Okay.
I did not know a lot of people there. I knew my direct editors, my direct reports, shall we say. Mm-hmm. And like if they wrote about cocktails and wine and beer, or I was the beer writer. Right. AJ was the cocktail writer, and that's kind of the way we worked. I moved in that circle.
What drew you to beer?
That's a good question. What drew me to beer? But I mean, everybody, it's the most popular alcoholic beverage on earth, right? It's by far the most popular. I mean, it's not, most people are omnibibolous, and they'll drink it. They'll drink other things too. But beer is the most popular alcoholic beverage on earth. So it's not unusual that I got attracted to beer. Kind of at some point, a lot of people do. But for me, where I became kind of maybe more like beer obsessed isn't the right word, but where I became a little bit more of an enthusiast and more kind of hardcore about it, was I was probably 16 or 18 years old, and I was fortunate to have parents that were liberal in a certain kind of way, conservative in another. But and then they didn't have a problem with me drinking responsibly when I was coming of age. And I had friends whose parents were from England. Oh. And their fridge, my dad's fridge, never had anything but Rainier beer in it. And my dad explained to me at a young age that, we're Rainier men. Your brother-in-law is an Ole man, but we're Rainier man. That kind of thing, right? So I grew up a Rainier man, I guess. But my English friends had parents whose fridge was full of all sorts of different things. And at one point, I went down to grab a beer out of their beer fridge in the garage, and I reached in there, and all the Rainier was gone. And I asked their father if I could have this beer, and he said, sure. And I opened it, and it was Samuel Smith's Tadcaster Porter. Okay. I thought for years that it was the oatmeal stout, but then I woke up in the middle of the night and had a dream. It was like, no, it was the Taddy Porter. So it was, and so this is when I'm probably 17 years old, I'm guessing. 17, 18 years old. And I drank this beer. I'm going, this was, for somebody who, grew up around American, light beers like that. I'd never had anything like this. It was crazy. And then one of my buddies said, well, you should have my granddad's beer. Granddad's coming down from Vancouver next week. And he'll probably bring some of his beer. And I go, what do you mean his beer? He's like, oh, he makes his own beer. I was like, he makes his own beer? What the hell are you talking about? So, and granddad's beer was not necessarily good, but it was way better than the homebrew that me and my friend Jonas Hinton found ourselves making a few weeks later, because that was horrible. So yeah, I brewed my first batch of homebrew, I think when I was 18 years old, and it was horrible. And it was probably a year and a half or 2 years later before I gave it another shot. And that was after I'd moved to Bellingham and had my own kitchen to work in and stuff. I was never a dorm rat. I always rented houses, lived with guys in houses and stuff. So we lived at 513 East Ivy, and wow, Chris Baldwin keeps coming into this conversation. So me and my friend Scott Donham started making beer, and we made some pretty damn good homebrew for what we had available to us at the time. And this is when we were like 20. I was maybe 21 at this point. Scott wasn't 21 yet, but we made some beer, and Baldwin made labels for us, and we put it in bottles and pasted on some silly labels to it. And that was pretty classic. We actually ended up getting a story in the local college magazine. I can't remember what they Forward Focus or Western Front. It was the magazine. They did a story about us crazy guys making our own beer in the basement in Bellingham, and Baldwin had made the labels for us and stuff, and it was pretty classic. But yeah, so I became a homebrewer, and I homebrewed my way all the way through college, and then continued to homebrew after I got out of college. And then not long after I got out of college, I started going out. I was of age, so I started going out to bars and stuff. And by the early 1990s, I was going out to bars and was able to order beers that were way better than the beers I was making myself at home. And I know homebrewing is a passion. It's not so much about making the best beer, it's about making your beer. Mm-hmm. But I got over that pretty quick.
You got over that one, okay.
And when I was able to go out and buy Red Hook, Black Hook, Pyramid Wheaten Ale, all the beers from Grant's, some of those Hales, some of those early craft beers and stuff, I was on, I don't need to be wasting my time trying to make beer at home anymore. I just like drinking good, flavorful beer. So that was kind of like my introduction. So I've kind of been with the whole craft beer thing since it began.
Right.
And I had going back to where I said Tadcaster Porter from Samuel Smith. They're a big brewery in England with pubs all across England. But that beer was originally imported into the United States, what began in the late 70s by Charles Finkel, who was, people might know Charles. If you know Charles, you know him because of Pike Brewing, most likely. Okay. He was a Seattle bon vivant for a long time. He was the man about town, and everybody knew him. Bow tie, Charles, and his company, Merchant du Vin, which he started before he started the brewery, was importing these English and European beers into the United States. And one of the early ones, was the Tadcaster Porter from Samuel Smith. So I thought it was cool that I eventually got to meet Charles and thank him for, thank him, Charles. I still blame you. I blame him for getting me obsessed about beer because of that one beer. And he did me one better. I actually got to tour the Samuel Smith's facility in Yorkshire many, 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 many years later. And that's not something that people generally get to do. It's a Willy Wonka kind of thing.
Okay.
That brewery, they kind of don't like to let people behind the curtain. And but I was able to. Somebody was like, I was working with somebody, I telling them, I want to go, I want to tour it, I want to tour it, I want to tour it. And they said, they don't do that. They just don't do that, especially not the media. They just don't do that. And I was like, don't make me get Uncle Charlie involved. And I dropped the Charles Finkel bomb on, and they're like, all right, I'll set it up. All right. So yeah, my wife and I got to tour the Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. For beer people, it's Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, and it's unlike any other brewery. I've been in a lot of breweries in my life, but it was unlike any other brewery I've been in. It's kind of like I walked away from it just going, there's no way they actually do it there. There's no way that all works. I mean, there's some magic or something. There's something they didn't show us, but whatever. That's a kind of a adjacent story. But yeah, so yeah, I go way back in the beer thing.
So I got to ask you this question. So you tried this British beer. Now, earlier you said your dad said you were Rainier men. Mm-hmm. Was Dad disappointed in you when you came home and he said,
honestly, my dad was gone by the time I started really getting into this professionally or really seriously. But no, I don't think he would have been disappointed in me for any of this. I think he would have been proud of me for finding my own way. He was a real kind of self-made, find your own way in the world kind of guy. So I think he probably would be proud of me for making something out of nothing, finding a place for myself and making something happen.
Candid question. What do you think of Rainier beer?
It's the most amazing thing because Rainier beer is now made at a gigantic facility down in Los Angeles where they make a lot of it. They make the same place where they make Olympia, the same place where they make Pabst Blue Ribbon, where they make Lone Star, where they make so many different beers down at that gigantic facility. But I'm telling you, it still tastes exactly the same. I don't know how they do it, but I swear that beer still tastes exactly the same as it did. And it's really weird because, you know, as I've got more of a refined palate, you know, this is getting maybe a little bit geeky, but I can tell the difference between Rainier beer and a lot of other beers of that ilk. Mm-hmm. Like if you give me a PBR or a Keystone or any other budget beer, I'm going to know that it's not Rainier. And when I get a Rainier, I'll know it, because Rainier actually, to me, tastes like it borderlines almost on like tasting like a cream ale, which is just bizarre, but it really does. It doesn't taste like all of those other budget beers. It has its own unique thing. So I can't really say that I'm still a fan of Rainier beer. I mean, I'm a fan of the brand. Mm-hmm. I love what they mean. I love their connection to Seattle. There was some, you know, there was some weird hope or dream that something would happen with Rainier beer coming back to Seattle somehow. And it's like, I was all in. I thought that would be so cool. I mean, it's this historic brand that grew up, that the city grew up around Rainier beer. Rainier beer was, was absolutely ubiquitous in this town. And, you know, it was Manny's Pale Ale before there was Manny's Pale Ale. It was everywhere in this town, you know, and my dad used to tell me that when he would visit another town, like he went to Portland a lot for his job, and he said he would drive around until he saw a Rainier sign in the window, because back in those days, that's the way taverns pretty much ran. Mm-hmm. Is, you know, they had a sign, the neon they had in the window was the beer that they had on tap. You wouldn't go into a bar and find out that they had Rainier and Olympia on tap. You went into a Rainier bar or an Olympia bar. Now this is way before my time. Mm-hmm. And I can't even imagine that now. But you know, he's like, yeah, I drive around town till I saw the red R in a window, and I knew that was the tavern I was going to go to. I remember, looking back, I do kind of remember that, you know, it always seemed like, you know, bars would have just like one sign, mm-hmm. you know, but whatever. That's a long, long time ago.
Their advertising, their marketing was so captivating.
Yeah.
The advertising agency that they hired, with Mickey Rooney and all of the
Heckler. It was Terry Heckler and Associates, right. I think.
Did you see the Rainier beer movie that the guys out of Tacoma put together
You know what? I haven't seen that yet, which is really, really ridiculous.
You need to. They did a really nice job with it. They really did. And I'm not a fan of the band of the beer at all. I never, even when I was under the age, and my parents weren't as cool as yours. You know, my friends that's what they would obtain.
Well, I should preface that. My parents were very cool people, but they were very cool to me. I was the youngest of five baby boomers, right? So they looked at me when I came along, and I was at the very, very, very end of I was barely a baby boomer at all. I was a baby boomer by 1 month, but
oh wow, okay.
They looked at me and just went, "You're gonna be fine."
Yeah.
You know, after what my sisters and my brother had put them through, especially my elder sisters had. You know, my sisters grew up in the 60s and went through the early 70s and stuff. And they were like, you know, one of my sisters was, you know, put them through a lot, shall we say. I mean, she's a great person, and everything ended up fine. But I think after watching everything turn out fine with my crazy older sisters, my parents were just like, we don't even need to pay attention to you. You're going to be fine. Right. They never listened to anything we told them to do. So why should we even bother telling you anything to do?
No, the branding though that company had was just, it was the brand of Seattle. It was the brand of the Northwest there in the mid 70s, you know, in early 80s. Even if you weren't a beer drinker, I remember going to school and talking about the new ad that we just saw. You know,
right.
My grandparents would talk about the ad. You know, they like, did you see the motorcycle ad? You know, all these things. So it was really good.
I remember that too. When we were kids, like before I even cared anything about beer, I thought their commercials were the best.
Yeah. And
it's like, I never understood exactly why these guys were chasing these stupid bottles around through the woods and stuff, but I thought they were funny and I thought they were great.
Right. And then
And the motorcycle commercials, like that might be like one of the best television commercials ever made.
Absolutely. And, if you look at it, I mean, Anheuser-Busch stole a lot of those ideas for the Budweiser and Bud Light ads, in the mid 80s. So anyway, as we're recording this in January of 2024, approximately how many breweries are
25, buddy. 25. You did it. You slipped.
Right. I did it. January 2025.
Oh my God. Don't I wish it was 2024 again?
Oh, geez. About how many breweries are there in Washington State these days?
Well, what's the number? 400. Let's just call it that.
There's 400.
I mean, it's, there's so many. I mean, there is a number. The number is actually like 430 or 425 or something, but so many of those breweries are just like really, really small basement operations. People have licenses that only make like one batch of beer a year, and things like that. So, I mean, honestly, in terms of like operating breweries that you can probably drink, that you can actually get their beer, if a lot of them you'd have to try to get their beer, but maybe 350, 325. I mean, it's still a remarkable number.
That's a large number. Out of those, let's just say 350, the ones that are producing more than a batch a year type thing. Who's the largest brewer right now in Washington State?
Georgetown.
Georgetown's the largest.
Georgetown Brewing is now by far the largest brewery. They're still on it. If you compared to like nationally, some of the bigger national craft beers, they are the largest in Washington by, I don't know, by I don't want to say a long shot, but by a good margin. They're the largest in Washington, and they're probably going to rank in the top 12 or 15 in the nation for 2024 production numbers, which is pretty remarkable. And I'd love to talk some more about that, because there's something that's really remarkable about that number.
All right.
You talked about Rainier being like the ubiquitous beer around here. Today, it's Bodhisattva, Bodhi IPA. I just recently had a friend of mine say, my wife texts me from the store and says, you want me to pick up a 6-pack of the orange beer? And she doesn't mean orange as in flavor. It comes in the orange can. Mm-hmm. People out there right now listening are probably very familiar with Bodhisattva IPA. Mm-hmm. It is the most prolific IPA in Washington. And there's the thing about it is what has happened with Bodhisattva and what Georgetown has done. I mean, Georgetown, they're the largest brewery in the state. They're also one of the very best. They do everything right. They are so good for the community. You can't say a bad thing about Georgetown Brewing. They're such good people, and they do such good beer. And it's away from the Manny's and the Bodhisattva and the things that everybody knows. Go to their tap room. They're going to have a whole bunch of stuff on tap that's experimental, that you've never had before, you've never heard of before. It's a great brewery, great brewery. I can't say enough about them. But what they've done with Bodhisattva is just really remarkable. So I said that they're probably like let's just for the sake of argument, say they're number 12. Right. In the nation. Well, the number 12 brewery in the nation, I'm going to guess that about 50% of their production is Bodhisattva. So think about that for a second. Oh. That means that Bodhisattva might be one of the most popular, broadly consumed craft beers in America.
Wow.
I'd have to do some research on that, but I'm just like, sure, there's things like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that are in every 7-Eleven from Sea to Shining Sea and things like that. But, Sierra Nevada, Boston Brewing Company, some of those, they're craft breweries too, but they're exponentially larger than any of the other breweries we're talking about. There's like the top 3 or 4 breweries and craft breweries in America. And then everybody else is just like exponentially smaller than them. And Georgetown fits into that. So it's remarkable how widespread and ubiquitous Bodhisattva IPA has become. And it's not by accident, and it's not because of marketing or distribution, of course, has something to do with it, but you don't become that without the beer being that good.
Right.
And it might sound kind of weird to have a hardcore beer nerd like me talking like that Bodhisattva is that great. But the thing is you don't become what Bodhi has become without being that good. It's not, there's no tricks to it. You can't fool people's palates. I mean, I have friends who drink IPA, like exclusively. And I know that if I go to them and I bring them a can of something from Single Hill in Yakima, or from, Varietal in Sunnyside, or one of the other, Stemma Brewing up in Bellingham, these other breweries that make exceptionally good IPAs. And I hand them a can of something, and when they take that first sip, I know that whether they realize it or not, in their mind, they are comparing it to Bodhi. Bodhi is what IPA tastes like around here. And that can't happen by accident. 10 years ago or something, that beer won the gold medal in the IPA category at the Great American Beer Festival. And that's like the most prestigious beer judging competition in North America, if not the world. And it's a remarkable achievement just to win that medal. And that was probably the last year that it really mattered, because at that point, IPA had reached its apex. At that point, there was like probably 8,000 breweries in the country, and every brewery made at least 2 or 3 IPAs. So think about how many IPAs there are in the country. How many of them got entered? There was like 150 or 175 or more actually probably more in the category. I think there's like 235 or something when Bodhi won. Oh. And so they really did produce a beer that was just like got everybody's attention and was that good. And like I say, the fact that it's become the flavor of IPA around here, it's what everything gets compared to. Now, I know like a lot of the hardcore beer geeks would go, what are you talking about? You're out of your mind. It's like, no, I'm talking about normal people. I'm not talking about us hardcore beer geeks who taste everything and analyze everything to death. I'm just talking about normal people. This is what IPA tastes like to them. So if you're going to make an IPA, you got to, recognize that people are going to compare it to Bodhi, and just think about how remarkable it is to get your beer to that point. It's really, really impressive. So back to Georgetown. I mean, yeah, they're the largest one in the state, but I mean, it's just ridiculous to think that they're not one of the best as well. Right. I mean, it's remarkable what they've done. And it started with Manny's, the way that, Manny himself out there, when they were still really small 20 years ago, Manny himself was out there being the sales guy, getting all those taverns and stuff to put his beer on tap and, built the brand that way. And, it's just remarkable what Georgetown has done. And everybody in the beer community, everybody who's not even in the beer community, everybody should be proud of what Georgetown has done. Because they've done it the right way. They're super good people. And like I say, they give back to the community so much. They did this. Okay. A magazine asked me to write a story, like a feel-good story about a brewery that was doing some really good philanthropic work. So I said, I'm going to write a story about the Bob's Brown Ale, which is a beer that Georgetown makes every year, and proceeds from it benefit the Ronald McDonald House for reasons we won't get into, but it's a very near and dear cause to them. And I said, I need to know how much money you have earned with this project so far, because that's going to be part of my story. And they're like, I mean, Manny literally said, no, don't tell him that. Just tell him we've raised a lot of money. You don't need, it's like, as soon as it gets to, no, you don't need to, because it's not about us, right? He's like, we don't want to make it sound like we're so cool or anything, and I was like, that's so remarkable, because most people would just love to stand up on top of something and say, we've earned $2 million for the Ronald McDonald House. Sure. But Manny's just like, no, that's not what it's about. Just tell people it's for a good cause, and we're happy to support the cause, and they don't need to know the dollar figure. So there, I just blew it. I just gave you the dollar figure. I don't know what it is now. That was years ago. Wow. They still do it every year. Wow. Okay. It's a lot of money, but that's just one of the charitable causes that they support. But all of our breweries support good charitable causes, but Georgetown deserves a little bit of an extra shout out for that. All right.
In your opinion, the state of the Washington craft beer space, what's happening? What's good right now? What are you seeing that's happening that's interesting to you?
It's tough. The market has changed a lot. So a lot of breweries are really struggling right now. In the face of those struggles, some breweries are finding new paths forward, which is encouraging. Unfortunately, it's taking its toll. We're losing breweries. Some of the smaller breweries, especially, are having difficult times navigating these troubles. But I guess what I'd say is that the breweries that are it's hard to put a blanket statement on that, but I mean, I'd like to say the breweries that are doing a good job are going to be fine, and the ones that aren't doing a good job are failing. But that's not necessarily true. That would be a blanket statement that is not true. I could say that kind of as a generalization that would cover about maybe 75% of what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. The breweries right now that seem to have really good business plans and good business heads on their shoulders seem to be doing okay and seem to be finding a way to move forward and weather all of this. And I think, unfortunately, it's not going to be about weathering. It's not like this is a storm that's going to pass. COVID was a storm that, we hoped would pass. And this is not a storm. This is just a change. The upcoming generation drinks less beer. Mm-hmm. You don't have a culture of beer nerds like you used to. Now people are coming up and they may drink everything. They may drink craft cocktails as well as beer, or they may, and honestly, the upcoming generation just drinks less. Whatever they're drinking, they drink less. So that's creating some challenges. There are economic challenges in the industry that nobody is expecting. Unfortunately, nobody's expecting to go away in the near future. The rising cost of ingredients, the rising cost of materials. The industry is pretty frightened right now about the cost of aluminum going up again, because we get, the majority of our aluminum that's used for making aluminum cans comes from Canada. Mm-hmm. So everybody's worried that the price of that's going to go up. And, the industry, a lot of people in the industry right now, I mean, what I'm hearing is like, we can't absorb one more thing. We just can't absorb one more thing. Right. So, whatever the next thing is going to be, it's going to be rough. So I think we're going to see some significant attrition. This is in the United States this year, or last year, I should say, 2024 was the first year in a long, long time. I mean, I don't know, maybe 20 years that we actually saw fewer breweries open than close. Okay. We're still kind of at about an equilibrium. One opens, one closes. But for a while there, we were at the point where, 3 were opening for every one that was closing. Right. But we seem to be on kind of a trending the other way right now, which is rough. But, there's 9,700 breweries in the country. That, for various reasons, that's kind of an unrealistic, unsustainable number. I mean, honestly, I'm the last person that should say this, but do we really need that many breweries? So I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't think the trend is really positive right now. Okay. I see a lot of breweries that are, I still see breweries that are making really good beer. And I really appreciate the fact that a lot more of our breweries are getting serious about making good, lighter beers like Pilsners and Helles and lighter lagers and things, instead of just focusing entirely on big, strong IPAs. That's really encouraging. I think that could help, because that will, make the product more attractive to a larger audience. That's something that a lot of people like me in the beer world have been hoping would happen for a long time. It's like, I thought it was great that we were making these big, strong IPAs and these beautiful imperial stouts and stuff. But as long as that's all we're making, there's a whole group of people over there that just don't want that. Right. So let's make something that they want. We can still make our IPAs and our stouts, but let's make something that everybody wants too, So that's encouraging. That's probably the most encouraging thing right now, and the fact that, like I say, the breweries that are doing good, that seem to have their business act together, seem to be navigating things well.
Is there anybody in Washington State that's doing any non-alcoholic beers at the craft level I don't want to say that they're good. I don't mean like that, but that are notable maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's actually, this is fascinating, because 2 years ago I would have said no. Okay. There's one brewery, Three Magnets Brewing, has a whole kind of division that they'd spun off, called Self Care, and they did that a few years ago. They did it basically back in COVID times, and even then, it took a long time for them to get it together. To where they're doing it well. Making non-alcoholic beer is not an easy thing to do, as much as people might want to think that it's not easy to do. It's not easy to make good non-alcoholic beer. So Self Care out of Olympia is doing a really, really good job these days. It took, I don't mean to offend anybody down there in Olympia, but it took them a couple of years to get to where I would say that about them.
Okay.
But the beers are good now, and Fremont Brewing has a non-alcoholic beer. Reuben's just introduced, and Reuben's will be introducing some more non-alcoholic beer, and I just had one of their IPAs the other night, and their non-alcoholic IPA is really good. I mean, it's really tricky because there's not a single way of making non-alcoholic beer. There's one way to make beer, and this is how we make beer. And it's a matter of whether you make it well or what you use in it and what you do. But how you make non-alcoholic beer is tricky. And there's more than one way. And a lot of people are just now starting to explore that. Reuben's has been working on it for like 2 years, and it has just now gotten to the point where they've got a product where they're like willing to put in front of people with their name on it. Like I say, I drank it and I thought it was really good, but they have, and don't want to get into the nerdy details of it, but they're doing it differently. I'd never heard of anybody doing it quite the way that they're doing it. And, part of it is experimentation. Part of it is the learning curve. Part of it is the fact that, 10 years ago, nobody was making non-alcoholic beer. 5 years ago, nobody was making non-alcoholic beer. Now it's really popular. It's the only in the world of beer, the beer marketplace, the non-alcoholic craft beer is the only segment of the beer industry that's growing, and it's growing quite a lot and quite fast. So we're going to see more non-alcoholic beers in the next couple of years. And when I say non-alcoholic beers, I'm talking about craft, right? Non-alcoholic craft beer, and more breweries, your local neighborhood brewery, the small breweries that people love around the state and stuff. You're going to start to see them making non-alcoholic beers because people are learning.
When you said that non-alcoholic beer is the only craft segment that's growing, approximately what percentage of the craft industry is the non-alcoholic component now?
Oh, it's still really small. I don't know. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, but a lot more than it was 2 years ago. Well, it's not like it's 25% or something. I mean, it's like 2% or something like that. But it's growing.
It's a noticeable number though now. It's not just a
Yes.
It's kind of like in the coffee industry, everyone says they want decaf. And yet I don't want to say nobody, making a quality decaf coffee is difficult. It's expensive. Right. And even the best decafs that I've had, they're lacking something that I can't quite put my finger on. The non-alcoholic beer that I've had is it Athletic Brewing?
Yeah.
I've had a couple of theirs, and they were drinkable. I mean, I'm not going to tell you I thought they were the best beers I've ever had, but I didn't take a sip and then throw the can away.
Well, to me, I mean, and everybody's, like I said, even Athletic's big.
Yeah.
But, just so you know, they're a sizable operation.
Mm-hmm.
And not that has anything to do with what I'm about to say, but with their beers, what I've always gotten out of it is they all taste oxidized to me, which is, a beer flavor profile term. It's something that we consider a flaw in beers. A flavor that kind of would lean like towards sort of like a wet cardboard kind of taste in the beer. And what I taste in a lot of the non-alcoholic beers is not like oxidized in that sense, but that's where it takes my brain. My brain goes, it's kind of an oxidized flavor to it. And I think it has to do with the fact that I don't know exactly how Athletic does it, but one of the more common ways to make non-alcoholic beers, you basically boil it. So you make beer and then you boil off the alcohol. So now you've made beer. You basically boil the grains and stuff before you chill it, ferment it, and everything. Now you're taking that product, and instead of putting it in the fridge and drinking it, now you're taking that product and you're boiling it, and then you have to pasteurize it, because if you don't pasteurize your non-alcoholic beer, it's probably going to blow up in the garage, which has happened to me before. So you have to pasteurize it, which once again is boiling it. So a lot of the non-alcoholic beers have basically They made a beer and then they boiled it twice. They put it in a can and boiled it. Not quite like that. But, it's like, that's why. So to me, it's not surprising that some of the beers taste like they've been sitting around in the trunk of a car in the sun for too long, and then you chilled it and you expected it to taste good, but like I said, it's amazing how the strides that these people have made. I mean, there's a beer I drank it's actually a Goza, which is an interesting style of beer on its own, but Self-Care did a lemon lime Goza, non-alcoholic, and it's so good. I mean, it's like I want to drink it like after I work out. I mean, it's like it kind of tastes like Gatorade. It actually kind of goes down easier than Gatorade, but it's kind of salty, and Goza is a very particular style of beer, a little bit sour, has a little bit of a salty component to it, and so I mean, it's like if you can stop thinking about, like, I guess what I'm adjusting to is that I can't expect my non-alcoholic IPA to taste exactly like it's an IPA. Okay. It's going to taste like a non-alcoholic IPA. The alcohol is part of the flavor. So if you take the alcohol away, something changes about the flavor.
All right.
That's my opinion anyway. So
when I was on your blog, I saw an article on your top articles of 2024 that were popular. And I had a couple of questions. And my notes are scribbled in my handwriting and I can't read them. But there is the old FX McQuarrie's location is going.
Right.
Is that still on track?
I haven't heard anything about it since they made that original announcement. So I don't know. They made a lot of noise when they first made that announcement. And then I haven't even been by there to see if there's any construction going on or anything. Okay. So.
All right. That was interesting to me, though. To me, that's an interesting concept, that tanks versus.
It spurred a lot of heated debate and a lot of heated conversation when I posted that on Facebook, when I shared it around on Facebook, a forum where people could actually comment. And some people took exception to this idea that the tank bar was something new. But, people oftentimes, they know what they know, and what they know they think is everything. But what these tank bars are doing is different. I mean, a lot of brew pubs have tanks that they instead of putting the beer into kegs or cans or whatever, they put the beer into these big serving tanks. Then the beer comes out of the serving tanks out to the tap at the bar. But like, you might have seen the pictures that I had of the tank bar that I went to in London,
right,
where it's like, no, this is coming right out the side of the tank. And they are specially designed tanks that are made for this purpose. And part of it is gimmicky. It's the look of the thing. Mm-hmm. There's no getting around that. But craft beer these days maybe needs a gimmick or two.
Okay.
Maybe we need something silly to get people excited. Like, there was a time, I remember when I was younger, and the first time I went into a brew pub, and I was like, wait, what? This is a pub that they actually make their own beer? What are you talking about? I got to get my friends to come up here. They're not. It was in Canada. I'm like, I'm going to start bringing my friends up here on the weekend. They're not going to believe this. They make their own beer right here. There was a time when that was a shtick.
Right.
So I think it's great. And I know the one that I went to in London was fabulous, and the beers were just absolutely outstanding. And were they outstanding because they were being served fresh that particular way? I don't know. Maybe that brewery just makes really, really good beer regardless. But that story created a lot of people took exception to the idea of me using terms like the first tank bar.
Okay.
And it's a deep subject. As I learned when I posted it, there's a lot of people who have different opinions about what that concept is all about.
Okay. And actually, the other topic I want to discuss with you is the article you just published as of today, which is called Fresh Beer, Happy Brewery, the importance of buying beer direct.
Yep.
And there's a picture of a box from Seven Seas, and in the corner, I caught the Heidelberg logo, which I was laughing at. Who's doing Heidelberg these days?
Seven Seas.
Seven Seas is. Okay.
Well, when Seven Seas, where their location, their big brewery and tap room in Tacoma, downtown Tacoma, in the aptly named Brewery District of Tacoma, which they are in the building that was like the packaging facility
Right.
for Heidelberg back in the day, and their building that they're in is huge right now. I mean, Seven Seas, the building is bigger than they need, and it's darn near an entire city block.
Wow.
But back in the day, Heidelberg took up like 4 or 5 city blocks
Yes,
down
they did.
there.
Yep.
And they moved in there, and there was a lot of kind of artifacts and historic. There's a lot of they were brewing in a context. They knew that they were in the old Heidelberg. They're on Heidelberg's turf.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I mean, I love the dudes at Seven Seas. They've got the best attitude. They were just like, hey, what the hell? Why don't we make Heidelberg? And it's like, well, I'm not telling you any secrets. I'm not telling you anything that I haven't written. At some point, they had to contact Pabst because Pabst has bought a lot of these old historic brands.
All right.
Not necessarily to make the beer, but just to own the brand. And Heidelberg was one of theirs. So they sent a letter to Pabst and said, here's our story. We're in the old Heidelberg building. We would love to make a new version of Heidelberg and use all of the logoing and stuff. And, could we talk to you guys about that? Crickets. So they sent another letter, and then they went to crickets. And then they went to their lawyers and said, look, we've sent them 2 letters. We've asked them twice. We've told them that we want to do this twice, and they haven't even responded. So they just went ahead and did it. So they just went ahead and did it.
Has Pabst ever responded now?
No, I don't think Pabst cares. I don't think, I mean, honestly, I think Heidelberg was just one of dozens of brands that they have in a filing cabinet over there someplace that they really don't care about. And they probably didn't really see any value in it.
Okay.
But, Seven Seas, I describe them. I mean, I love that about them having kind of a ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of attitude. They did ask for permission on this one though.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, that was really fun when they reintroduced Heidelberg. That was so cool. I was so stoked about that. And I actually like the beer. I don't remember what Heidelberg tasted like back in this, when there was such a thing as Heidelberg. I don't remember what it tasted like, but I promise you this doesn't taste anything like it.
Okay.
It's an entirely new beer. It's probably made with ingredients that they didn't have access to back in the day. So it's just a good light lager that's branded as Heidelberg, which I think is just brilliant. And the story behind it, I think, is great that they're in the old Heidelberg building and stuff. It's just really cool.
All right. So your headline, or the secondary headline, says, "Say it with me: never leave a brewery tap room empty-handed."
Yeah.
So I want people to read the article. So I don't want you to give it away here. So people go read the article, go visit his website, do all that stuff. But why is that so important for the craft beer industry?
Well, breweries operate on a really small margin, especially when you start talking about the beer that you're buying at the grocery store, or even the beer that you're buying on tap at some tavern someplace. The actual, when you buy a 6-pack of beer at the grocery store, the amount of money that actually, and that's going to be in the brewery's pocket because of that is really, really, really small. There's the distribution channels, the distribution chains, the markup at the retail level, all of that stuff gets into account, and it ends up being just a tiny number percentage. Like I said in the article, I don't want to get into misquoting numbers and stuff because they're different for a lot of different people and stuff, different breweries and different distributors and all that stuff's all different. But trust me, it's really, really small. If you buy it from the brewery directly, when you're checking out at the brewery and you're signing your tab and you turn around and you see a cooler back there full of cans, know that that's where they're making their most profit on their packaged product. I mean, the brewery you're doing them the biggest favor by going to the brewery and drinking the beer there. And then by buying some beer on the way out the door, that's going to help them out a lot too. Because don't stop buying local beer at the grocery store. Right. I'm not suggesting that people do that. I'm just saying that if you're at a brewery tap room, do them a favor and just grab a 6-pack on the way out the door.
Don't just have a couple of pints. Grab something to go when you
take something home with you.
All right.
And there's, like I explained in the article, there's benefits to that for the consumer as well as for the brewery.
Okay. When we talked on the phone, I think the news was it No Lie?
Right. In Spokane.
They had just won an award.
Yep. Well, they had been They had won the award some time ago.
Okay.
They won a medal for that beer, for the Wrecking Ball Imperial Stout. They won the medal some time ago, but this was Forbes recognizing them.
Okay.
Forbes magazine recognizing them, that they had achieved on an international scale like that. Because this was not, like I mentioned, the Great American Beer Festival and how it's a really important beer competition here in the United States and maybe in North America. Mm-hmm. Not many breweries try to compete on an international level. No Light's one of the ones that is like, they're not afraid to send their beer to any beer competition in the world. And they won a pretty prestigious medal. And Forbes, and I'm guessing the people at Forbes drank the beer and liked it. So yeah, they got a pretty nice honor from Forbes. That was pretty cool.
I have not had that beer. What do you think of it?
I love it. It's I haven't had it in quite a while,
mm-hmm.
but it's a good, solid Imperial Stout. Okay. Big, strong beer. Lots of dark, rich, malty, toasty kind of character to it.
All right.
And it's awesome because it's available in a can, which is not that unusual for a beer of that kind these days. But back when they started canning it a few years ago, it was like the idea that an Imperial Stout came in anything but a big bottle, mm-hmm. That's the way we think of Imperial Stouts, come in these big fancy bottles. It's like, no, it's in a can, okay. Which is kind of more appropriate. So, instead of opening a 22-ounce bottle, you open a more reasonable sized can.
Right. Right. All right. If I were to show up at your house right now, knock on the door, ring the front doorbell, come into your house.
Mm-hmm.
How many different beers do you have in your fridge?
We're actually loaded up pretty well right now because, like I said, I never leave a brewery empty-handed. Right. And my wife and I have been out touring some local breweries. I mean, we've been out to some events, and we've actually gone out and stopped by some breweries. So we probably have, I would say, maybe eight or 10 different kinds of beer on the shelf right now from probably like 6 different breweries.
Okay.
But that's actually, even for me, that's kind of unusual. Yeah, it might be a more robust selection than that, even because of how much we've been out lately. But usually I'll have 2 or 3 different beers, types of beer.
Mm-hmm.
I also, in a kind of a different context, I do have some stuff that's stashed away in the beer cellar. Things that are big and can handle the aging, some stouts and some barley wines and things like that. So I'm not that's not the stuff that I would pull out when you walk through the door. Right. I'd probably just, grab you a can of this Reuben's Brighten Up IPA, right? Because I've got some of that laying around, and or maybe a Heidelberg,
Maybe a Heidelberg.
If you haven't had the Heidelberg yet, you should.
Haven't. No,
it's fun. It just feels good to be drinking out of that old can, a can with that old logo on it.
So what's your wife drinking these days? What is she like?
She's really happy about the changes. She likes Pilsners.
Okay.
And lighter lagers, Helles lagers, and things like that. So she's been really happy about the way the industry has been shifting.
Okay.
She likes IPAs too, but she doesn't, IPAs and pale ales and stuff. She tends to like the lower ABV stuff. So IPAs are, and neither of us are really big fans of the hazies.
Mm-hmm.
Hazies have become a lot less popular in recent years, in the last couple of years, than they were, say, 4 or 5 years ago.
So what's going up? If IPAs, you said earlier, the IPAs at apex. So what are you noticing trending upward?
The Pilsner. Yeah, Pilsner has been on a upward trajectory for quite a while now, and that makes me happy.
Okay.
And it's getting interesting because it's kind of the same thing as happening with Pilsner as happening with IPA. Because in the beginning there was IPA, India Pale Ale, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Northwest style IPA, Northeast style IPA, hazy IPA, West Coast IPA. Now it's that same kind of thing is happening with Pilsners a little bit.
Okay.
But more so than with the IPA, because a lot of times the IPA was just like kind of like, for lack of a better way to put it, it was just like badge engineering. They were just basically putting a new name on it, how different it was than any of their other beers, I don't know, or the previous version of the IPA, but they just call it a West Coast and somehow that's a new badge to put on it. Brewers would tell you there is a difference. I understand that totally, but with the Pilsners, the way it's going is like when somebody says this is a West Coast style Pilsner, it means it's a traditional Pilsner that's brewed with West Coast style hops. So, when they say like they have an Italian Pilsner, there's a very specific thing that makes it an Italian Pilsner. There's a very specific thing that they would say makes it a Northwest Pilsner. Okay. So, so the Pilsner has become kind of the new IPA.
All right.
And I predicted it was going to happen.
Okay.
And I predicted it in like 2011. So
what do you predict?
I was a little bit off. I was right in the long game, but I was absolutely wrong at the time.
So what do you think is going to happen in 2025? What's the hazy IPA crystal ball say?
I think we're going to see more breweries making NA beers. That's going to be a big one. I hope it happens. I mean, because we've got to start finding ways to turn on the new generation. So that's one of the things that I hope happens. And I hope people keep advancing the technology, and I hope breweries keep their heads down and stay focused on the quality of the product. Because I really do believe that, we have to start finding a way to attract the new generation of imbibers. Mm-hmm. And they are not all like, my generation, you were either the kind of person that drank wine, you drank liquor, or you drank beer. Mm-hmm. These days, people drink it all.
Right.
And you've got to be able to, your brewery's going to have, your brewery tap room especially is going to have to be able to appeal to people who don't necessarily drink beer. It sounds weird, but the brewery tap room is a community gathering space. It's an activity. Mm-hmm. It's a thing to go do with your friends on a Saturday afternoon that never existed before.
Right.
Up until like 10 years ago, that idea kind of didn't exist. Mm-hmm. But now it's a regular thing. It's like we're going to the brewery Saturday afternoon, and we're bringing the kids, and we're going to play board games or whatever the case may be. But if you have a group of 4 people and one of them just flat out doesn't drink beer, you're going to lose all 4 of them if you can't find a way to appeal to that one. So, hopefully more breweries. That's a trend that I'm going to see in the future, is more breweries finding ways to attract a broader audience. And also, I think, and I'm already seeing it, occasions, people creating occasions, reasons to come to the brewery, not just like come to the brewery because it's Saturday afternoon. It's like, no, come to the brewery. It's Saturday afternoon. We're going to have jugglers and clowns for the kids, or, come on Saturday afternoon because we're going to have this cool guy here playing his guitar, whatever. People are or we're having this special event. It might be a beer event, but we're having some sort of special event to create a reason for people to come to the brewery tap room. And as far as what's going to happen on the shelves, I think that, as lighter style beers get more and more popular, and hopefully the new generation of beer drinkers, of alcohol drinkers, come to understand that when we talk about craft beer, we're talking about a locally made product that supports, you're keeping the money really local. It's you're talking about a product that is closer to natural, that is more of like your maker, your maker culture kind of thing, all the things that they're into, whether they're into beer or not, right. they're into small produced, locally produced. They're into maker, the maker scene. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they'll come to understand, and we got to find ways to bring them into the fold and make them understand those things.
All right.
So there's people out there who don't understand the difference between drinking a beer that was brewed and shipped to Seattle, this brewed in Denver and shipped to Seattle, and drinking a beer that was brewed down the street at their, but even then I'm talking, I live in Seattle, but a brewery in Bellingham is not that far away,
right,
compared to drinking beer from a brewery in San Diego.
Right.
That, and like New Belgium Brewing in, I'd love to say this, but New Belgium Brewing has been, stalwart advocates, and they've done so much to advance the causes of sustainable brewing practices and just sustainable business practices overall. They've done just an absolutely brilliant job of being a brewery that embraces sustainability. And then they put their beer on wind-powered trucks, and the wind blows their beer up to Seattle. So every brewery falls down, is what I'm saying. So that beer gets here on trains and gets here on trucks. So no matter what they do at the brewery to be sustainable, that's a huge component of it. So I hope people continue to focus on the idea that there's value in drinking local. I don't mean to diss on anybody who's, buying beer that comes from another state or whatever, but just something to think about. And, like I say, if you got a brewery in your neighborhood, that's support that one.
Well, and I think what you're saying,
unless their beer is awful, and then, tell them to straighten up, fly right.
But if we were in Denver, you'd be saying support Colorado breweries, something versus having beer shipped in from Seattle. So I get that.
Well, did I mention that there's over 9,000 breweries in the country? So wherever you go, there are local breweries to support. So people ask me what's your favorite IPA? And it's like, I have no idea. There's probably 30,000 or 40,000 of them in the United States. I've only had 20,000 of them. I have no idea.
All right. I always ask my guests 3 questions. I'm going to vary this up a little bit with you today because I'm going to ask you the same question in 2 different ways. All right.
Okay.
So the first question is, I'm a coffee guy. Where's a great place to get coffee? You said you're in West Seattle. Where's a great coffee place in West Seattle?
We have a place up the street called Real Fine. Mm-hmm. And it's a great place to get coffee.
Okay.
So I'll just say that. I know the people, I know the owners, and their friend, I know them from the neighborhood, basically from West Seattle, and they're good local people. So that's where here I am. I'm right here. Here I am. I'm telling you, go local.
Right.
So I don't, nothing against Starbucks or any of the bigger coffee chains. We have some really good ones here around Seattle that are kind of your smaller regional kind of chains.
Yep.
But no, I'm going with the one that's right up the street from my house. It's 4 blocks up the street from my house, and I know the people who own it, and the coffee's really good.
What's your go-to coffee drink there?
I am so complicated when it comes to beer, but when it comes to coffee, I am just a straight up latte guy.
Okay. All right.
Just no nonsense.
All right.
I will sometimes, if I sometimes would prefer 2% if they have it. But I usually don't even think to ask.
All right.
I'm just straight up latte.
Perfect. All right. So next question, I'm going to get to the West Seattle area around lunchtime. Where's a great place to grab lunch?
Elliott Bay Brewing Company, the brew pub on California Avenue. They've got 3 locations around Seattle, but the one in West Seattle is their original location.
Okay.
The food is outstanding. I know it sounds ridiculous that I'm talking about beer again, but I'm telling you, the service is awesome. The food is great. And it's a great vibe, and they've been there for, I don't know, they've been in West Seattle since I've been in West Seattle, so since the late 90s.
Okay.
Since 97, I think is when they opened, 97.
All right.
So they've been around for a while.
So this
is they've retained employees because they're really good to their people, and like I said, the food's great. I actually might even be going there for dinner tonight. I don't know.
All right. So on that theme, I want you to think now, and I never asked this question, so you're I'm testing this question with you, but you're having some out of town guests come in. Okay. They're going to be here. It's Saturday afternoon, and you're going to go, you want to show them a good representation of the Seattle beer scene. Where would you take an out of towner?
Ballard.
Okay.
The Ballard Brewery District. I mean, there's at least a dozen breweries that are within walking distance of each other.
Okay.
I would probably start at Reuben's Brews and then walk around the corner to Stoop Brewing, cross the street to Urban Family. Especially if somebody's into sour beers, into that kind of beer, fruited sour beer, I'd take them to Urban Family for sure. And then I'd go across the street to Obet's and get them a nice lager. Around the corner to Wheelie Pop, then down the street. Good. If they want cider, we can go to the Bale Breaker and Yonder Cidery joint tap room. I mean, there's so many breweries in Ballard, and it's literally park your car once, and how many breweries can you go to in a day? Well, in Ballard, yeah, you're going to park the car once, and you can go to a dozen breweries that are all within. I mean, when I say walking distance of each other, a lot of them are just half a block away from each other.
All right.
So Ballard is the place.
Last question. I kind of prepped you for this, but this is the last question. You have to answer it. You've agreed to play along, so you have to answer it, and you have to give us a reason why. It has nothing to do with beer, okay? So, cake or pie?
Really? Oh man, pie.
Why?
I can't believe I said that, but yeah,
Why?
no, you made me think about it. So pie.
Why? What's the reasoning?
Fruit.
Okay. So what's the go-to pie? What would you want to have?
With my latte, my bland latte, I'd probably want apple pie.
Okay.
Apple pie, I think, is like the most perfect thing. One of the most perfect things that mankind ever invented.
Okay. There's no wrong answers here. It's just a fun question.
Yeah. I like cherry pie too. I just, but apple pie.
Okay. Growing up, did you grow up in a household with cake or with pie?
Cake.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I asked this
We were
question.
a cake family.
I asked this question to my guests, and I started asking this growing up question. And most people that pick pie grew up in a household that they had pie as a kid. You're bucking the trend.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe part of that is that, maybe, you know what? Actually, now that you mention it, I know where my pie thing came from. I had a next door neighbor when I was growing up. My next door neighbor, she started a second career as I came of age, like as I was in junior high school, say, she started a second career and became a pastry chef.
Oh, wow.
And she actually taught me at one point how to make apple pie. Now you're making me remember this. So yeah, Sandy Krieger, my next door neighbor, used to make pie, and her pie was outrageously good. So however good my mom's cake was or wasn't, Sandy Krieger's pie was amazing. So yeah, thank you for bringing that back up. I owe it all to Sandy.
Well, there we go. All right. So we'll put it in the show notes too, but where should people find you online?
WashingtonBeerBlog.com. And pretty much everywhere else on the socials, I am at BeerBlog. We're prolific on Facebook. I mean, that's probably my largest audience is on Facebook, and we're Washington Beer Blog on Facebook, easy to find. But on Instagram, at BeerBlog, don't do the platform that shall not be named anymore. But on Blue Sky and Threads, I am at BeerBlog.
I'm surprised you were able to get that across the channels.
Yeah, it's an early adopter of pretty much all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been great for me because I feel like I have a better grasp on the craft beer scene in Washington State, what's happening now, and kind of a little bit of the historical thing of it. I love what you're doing, and I stumbled across this. I'm not sure exactly how I stumbled across this, but at the same time, I was like, how did I miss this before? So that was the really, the weird thing. And then I got to share this story. So if somebody's listened this far along, they can listen to this last stuff. So I was supposed to call you because I have that icebreaker call where I get on the phone with somebody for 15 minutes, right? And just kind of like, hey, this is what the show's like, blah, blah, blah. Make sure that's going to work for everybody. And I was on the phone with Chris Baldwin. And Chris is Island Time Coffee, and his coffee company is the official coffee of Explore Washington State. I love what he's doing. And his wife went to college with my wife, and that's how all that, right? So I'm talking to Chris, and we're having this conversation. I go, I got to go. I got this 4:00 call, and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't wrapping up, and that's fine. And I'm like, but Chris, I got to go because I got to call this guy at 4:00. I don't know this guy. I got to call this guy. So I hang up the phone. Call you. We get on the phone. I mentioned this, and you go, Chris is one of my best friends.
Yeah, that was funny.
What?
Yeah, so like while we were talking, I was texting Chris, sorry about stealing him, but I was the 4:00.
Yeah, and I called Chris afterwards. I said, and he's like, yeah, he just texted me, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just like such a small world. And he does, you're right. His graphic design work is phenomenal. So I got to go look up Four on the Floor's logo.
I don't know if you're gonna be able to find it anywhere.
Oh,
I don't even know I don't know if we still have our Facebook page up or anything.
Well, I'll ask Chris. I bet he's got it somewhere tucked away. He'll share it. But,
yeah.
But thank you, and
Maybe.
keep championing the craft beer industry in Washington.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for helping me with my mission of promoting the craft beer industry.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.